I'm Scott Allen Miller. This is Sheep Guarding Llama, and for December 20th, 2019, it is a Thursday, and today we're celebrating, quite late, Liesl's birthday. So it's a Thursday. So this morning I had to get up and work and do my normal day. I told everyone yesterday that I was going to be knocking off quite early today. Dominica and Paul spent the entire morning working on designing cupcakes because they did these chocolate on chocolate cupcakes with all this fondant design to make these little creatures from, I want to say, Yu-Gi-Oh, but I don't really know. And something for Liesl that she was very excited about, but I don't know what it was. And did that and just other prep items. And then I knocked off work. So basically just worked all morning. They on food and me on NTG. And by about 1:30, it was jump in the shower. And at 2:30, their friends were dropped off here, Isabella and Wancho, and we loaded them up. Their mom wasn't feeling well, so I drove us out to Richardson to the Free Play, which I've not been to. It's actually not that different from the one in Denton. It's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit more spacious, which is definitely nice. The one in Denton, you're bumping into people when you try to do things, but the one in Richardson works out pretty decently. And we did the entire afternoon of arcades. Free Play is an arcade, or a beercade, as they call them here, or whatever, a barcade. So there's a bar, and there's food, and there's a really large classic arcade, which is basically a living museum, which is a great idea. Like, it's super cool. I'm not into arcade games at all, but it's like, I recognize the fact that it's a really cool living museum, and you can play the original games, and they put in so much money and time into maintaining them. There's a whole bunch of games that, like, this is more or less the only place left where you could possibly play it, which is super cool. This one had the original arcade game of Marble Madness, which I've never played, but Marble Madness was the very first video game I had on my Commodore Amiga, which was my very first computer. So when I was Liesl's age, 11 years old, 1987, my first computer, Commodore Amiga 1000, very first thing that we ran on it after we got through the setup was this 3.5-inch floppy disk of Marble Madness, which I played for years. It was super hard, and I never quite completed, but I got so close to the end. So close. And this is the original arcade game. So that was just interesting. It was neat to see that. And there's also the arcade game of Ladybug, which, if you go back to when I was 7 years old, 1982, that doesn't seem right. Must have been 1983. We got the Commodore Amiga. Oh my gosh. 1983, we got the ColecoVision. And I don't know if we got it on the very first day, but one of the original games that we got within the first 6 months was Ladybug. And it remains, to the best of my knowledge, my father's favorite game. Definitely my father's favorite game from that era, but I think it may still be his favorite game. And Dad, if you're watching, you should get the arcade stand-up version, and then you just have it. But so they have the actual arcade. I don't know if I've ever seen it in an arcade before, and I don't know if I've ever seen Marble Madness in an arcade before. But it was interesting that may not be the game that came with the Coleco, but my memory tells me that either that came in the Coleco box, and that was the game that came with it, or it was one of the games that my parents got me for the Christmas that we got the Coleco. And so it was just a day one for me, just like Marble Madness was for the Amiga. But it was interesting that they had both of my day one games from those two, my first two systems, at the arcade. So that was cool. Overall, I do not like arcade games. I don't like standing at a game to play, especially now because I've got the Achilles tendon problem with my right foot going on to the point, it's seriously painful. And I have the carpal tunnel, so I can't do the buttons and everything. Like, everything hurts. It's uncomfortable. It's not bad. It's just uncomfortable. It's not pleasant to play the games. And I don't enjoy arcade games. I like video games for story, maybe for artwork, music, and arcades have none of that. First of all, they have blasting music overhead, so you really can't hear the game at all. And you have all these other games next to you, so it's music with all kinds of noise, and then people making a lot of noise because you have to, because it's so loud. And then the games have no story, right? It's just a bunch of lines and beeps and whatever. And even the newer ones are just mash a bunch of buttons and fight somebody or something. It lacks something for me. It's just not something I enjoy. But the kids like it, and Dominica really likes it. And both Dominica and Paul find it a little bit more nostalgic. I didn't grow up with arcades in the same way, just because I grew up in the country. So I rarely went to arcades. So going to this is neat because I'm like, I remember when they had these, but I don't remember in like a when I used to play arcade games. It just isn't like that. I had Eric and I used to go play Double Dragon in Warsaw to the point where we beat it, which people are like, you beat a game like that? Oh yeah, we used to pump in the quarters. We knew how to beat it. We would do it pretty cheaply, to the point when I bought it for a computer, I beat it on the first try. When I first taught, just straight through. So that was the one that I played a lot. I really liked Ikari Warriors, but almost never got to play because nobody had it. Now no one remembers it. There were a handful of ones I played over the years, but when I was older in like high school, I played a little bit of Mortal Kombat, but yeah, whatever. By that point, the Genesis and later the SNES came out not too long after that, and those were so much better because you could do all that stuff just as well at home. So I pretty much didn't have the arcade era, but I did have a ColecoVision in the early era in the 8-bit, and then in the 16-bit, I had the Amiga really early, and loaded with really good games that are still pretty classic. You know, King's Quest and Bard's Tale, Fairy Tale Adventure, some things like that were deep. With lots of story and lots of time. I mean, Bard's Tale, you could put in hundreds of hours on that, right? So that's I have a much deeper video game story much earlier in life than most people of my age do, but arcades just never did it for me. But so the kids had a great time. We were able to be there for 3 hours. They actually closed at 6 because they had a private party, which worked out. We weren't ready to be there that much longer than that. 3 hours is actually a long time in arcade, but they had a good time. They played games the whole time. I know Luciana and Wancho really like this. It's called like something in the jungle. I can't remember. And you have machine guns and you ride on a jeep and you shoot things. But it actually has like a romantic story. It's like how much did you protect your partner, and your compatibility score comes out. It's very very goofy, but kind of fun. It's made by Sega if you ever need to look it up. And they had something called Queen Kill or Killer Queen or something, and it's this 10-player modern game with okay graphics and really simplistic gameplay, but actually you get a whole bunch of people on it. We played it for at least an hour. That was kind of fun because it was 10 players head versus head, and it's 5 players on one screen, 5 players on another screen. You can't even see the farthest people from each other. It's interesting. Someone came up with something that's actually a modern, good arcade system, and it can't be that expensive to build. The game takes like no processing power. It's so simple. There's no 3D. It's all 2D. You could totally run it on like a Pentium 2 and nothing else. And it's just two big flat panel screens and 10 controllers. And if you think about how little each of those things cost today, that whole machine, and the game is so simple, the whole thing had to cost them 1/100th, I mean 1% of what an old-fashioned like Pac-Man used to cost. Like just crazy how cheap it was. Must be to make this giant game that was really interesting. So that was kind of fun. I played a few random things, but mostly Dominica and I played Street Fighter with each other for a second. I hate those games. Just a bunch of button mashing, very frustrating. You never know. You don't even know who won, right? It's just like random. That's dumb. I find it. I prefer to just sit and read my phone. Like it's not entertaining. But the kids, they had a good time, and that was we got dinner there. We got some flatbread pizza things, and a fruit and cracker cheese tray thing. And it was pretty nice. I had a bit of work stuff that came up, so I was able to just sit and work on that for a while, and nobody cared because they play arcade games, and I don't care. The one thing I thought was pretty cool, they actually had a Pong game there, and it's made by it's Atari. It's got the original Pong, and it's got these big controllers that you turn. But instead of like an LCD or a CRT screen with the Pong going on, it actually has it's got to be a plotter underneath the hood that moves really fast and has a really strong magnet, and it's foam pieces that move back and forth for your paddles and a foam block that moves around. So it looks like, but it's physical under glass, and it bounces around, and you play Pong, and the whole thing the gameplay is still Pong. It's still stupid, but it's really cool that they did it with something physical instead of a screen. So it's just this screen mechanism is so interesting that it's almost like a moving art piece, right? It's neat. I really like that, just that it was there, but you only play it for 30 seconds and you're like, all right, there's nothing more interesting about it. That's it. You can move some foam. So it was about 6:30. We had to run Isabella and Wancho home. So a little bit closer to 7 by the time we were all back at the house. And this evening, so Paul did go, but he got there after us. He went and had dinner, then joined us at Liesl's birthday party, and then he took off a little bit early because he had to get ready for league tonight. He went to league. Dominica did not join him because there's so much to do this evening. I came home and worked because there's a lot to do because I was gone. So just getting things ready. And Dominica worked on packing because they were leaving early tomorrow morning. And so she packed until she was tired. And then she and I watched some television together until probably later than she wanted to be up. And I can't even remember what we were watching. That's what happens when you get old. And then I stayed up and worked a bit more after that because I don't have to be up quite as early, but I do have to be up fairly early. I have a meeting at 7:30 in Plano, so I have to get my butt moving pretty early tomorrow morning. But that was the day of Liesl's birthday party. It was cupcakes and I forgot. So I think she did these yesterday, but Dominica was making chocolate controllers that look like PlayStation controllers. They came out so well. They're so cool. Somewhere I've got pictures of them, but I had not tasted one. There was not one for me, but they turned out really, really well. But pretty much Liesl's party was the entire day and then packing to head to Houston tomorrow. It is Christmas season. It's hard to believe. It has come up on us fast. And yeah, I think that's it. Whew. Been a long day.